My last guest of the hour is a key administration official who has the ear of President Joe Biden, like all the time. Ron Klain is the White House Chief of Staff, and I had the chance to speak with him a short while ago about what a more perfect union means to the Biden administration. Here's what he had to say.
Ron, thank you so much for joining us today. Listen, when President Biden launched his political campaign, in part, it was at a very dark moment in American history. It was the Charlottesville moment, and he said, we have to fight for the soul of the nation. January 6th was another moment where it felt clear that this fight for the soul of the nation was underway. As we talk today about a more perfect union and what it takes to make that a more perfect union, I just be interested in your reflection after being in the White House. How are we doing on that cause of how President Biden shaped it of fighting for the soul of the nation?
Well, look, I think it's something he thinks about every day as president. Is what can he do to pull this country together, to move this country forward, to try to heal the divisions that we have. And I think we've made some progress in that regard. And, I think in terms of where we were as a country when he became president, we had 4,000 people a day dying from COVID. We had no job creation in America. We had just a country kind of badly divided over what the path forward is. And I think we've made a lot of progress on that. We obviously went and vaccinated over 200 million Americans. We've, made progress in terms of job creation. We've made progress in terms of moving the country forward. And in terms of the legislative front, we were able to put together a bipartisan infrastructure plan, bring Democrats, Republicans together on the most significant piece of legislation in decades in that regard, made progress on bipartisan innovation legislation, so-called CHIPS Act and innovation legislation. So we still have a long way to go. There's no question it's still a country that's divided. There's no question there's still a lot of cleavages in this country. Look at issues like voting rights and immigration. You see those divisions. But I think we didn't get in this mess overnight, Steve. This wasn't just something that happened recently. These are long-standing divisions in our country. It's going to take time to heal them and bring the country together. But that's something that the president's very, very focused on.
You talked about COVID and the infrastructure bill, and there are little divides in all of these areas. But when you look at what this nation came through and still is going through, I kind of remind people we're not through the pandemic. It's still underway. There's still people suffering. But there's sort of a tale of two nations going on right now. And one thing is clear, when I talk to all sides of this corner, when I go down and talk to those people that are against wearing masks, those that are for them, and everywhere in between, there is a kind of palpable lack of trust in institutions, lack of palpable trust in politicians and governors, and even in science. I sort of feel like we're on the edge of so many scientific revolutions in this country, but if Galileo were alive, he'd still be found guilty. I'm interested in how you folks think about institutions and what's going to be the secret sauce you think you can bring to bear to restore trust in institutions.
Well, first of all, Steve, I have to push back against the premise a little bit here, which is there isn't 100% support for mask wearing or 100% support for vaccinations or some of the things you mentioned, but there is overwhelming support. So, more than 70% of the country is fully vaccinated. Virtually 80% of adults have had at least one shot. 95% of seniors have had one vaccination. Mask mandates have overwhelming public support. Not unanimous support. I agree. There are definitely people against all these things, but the country is united. It is united, not unanimous, but united with overwhelming support for science-based measures to fight COVID, as you said. And so I think that we have to remember this is a big country. There are always going to be some dissenting voices. It's the way it should be, I suppose. I mean, it should be that way, absolutely. But my point being that those dissenting voices can't drown out the overwhelming majority support for the kind of measures you're talking about. So I think sometimes we see if something's a 70-30 issue, that's a lot of unity in a big country around the steps we're taking on COVID. So that's the first thing I'd say in response to that. Now, look, I do think that we do have a lot of challenges still to tackle on COVID, on the economy, on these other issues you're talking about. But I do think we are finding the president's economic agenda. Most of the polls have 65, 70% support. This is a very much a strong consensus agenda that is uniting the country. Again, not unanimous, but uniting the country behind these measures we need to take.
Well, let me ask you just to break down. When the president came in, he said there were some big principles that you were about: climate, equity, inequality, solving these challenges and problems as part of the way of bringing the nation together. We're right before the Glasgow UN climate change talks. We've got battles going on over the reconciliation bill, over the infrastructure bill that's attached to it, and other kinds of things. I'm just sort of interested as you kind of look at it. And, you're famous, Ron, for being the guy during debate prep talks to always come up with the angle that wasn't thought of, the critique no one thought. If you were to be that guy for your own administration, looking at the agenda and saying, hey, we haven't done this, this is not where we've gone, things haven't gone right, what would be some of your areas of concern, even about your own administration, in delivering on these very principled planks that you laid out at the beginning?
Well, look, I think we've made a lot of progress, and we have a lot of action on the board right now. And I'd say the thing we need to do is deliver on the proposals that are pending. Look, we have a proposal in the reconciliation bill, in the Build Back Better bill, to make a historic investment in climate change, more than $500 billion over 10 years. Just to put that in perspective, the entire Department of Energy over the next 10 years is going to spend $450 billion. We're talking about an investment in climate change larger than the entire Department of Energy. We just now have to go get that done. I think we're making a lot of progress in that regard. I think on the issues of race, we definitely need to deliver on voting rights, on criminal justice reform. But again, we've made a lot of progress on some of the economic issues of opportunity. The Black unemployment rate is down below 8% again. We've made progress in terms of creating jobs, made progress in terms of investing in historically disadvantaged farmers, for example, big proposal in the rescue plan that the president got done. So, we're making progress on this agenda. It all obviously isn't all done. We're 9 months into the president's term, but I think, have put solid proposals on the board. I think we're very close to getting some very big ones passed. We just need to keep up with the work.
Another part of this question about how do you restore, I guess, quality and solvency to American democracy is to look at the just huge increase in misinformation and disinformation and those platforms, where I won't say that have allowed it necessarily, because that'll be litigated, but where it has definitely happened. And you just see, conspiracy theories driving at least the aperture of some folks out there. And I'd just be interested, particularly with COVID, but there's a lot more than that, where America seems uniquely vulnerable because of the openness on information and freedom of expression. I'm just wondering how you think we can get to a place where social media platforms, where the big new tech companies, feel a responsibility, a national responsibility to getting this right.
Well, I think it's a great question. And I agree, COVID is front and center in that conversation, but not the only thing by far. There are all kinds of issues where they get blown up on social media. Misinformation, disinformation further serves to divide us and push us apart. Look, I think the president's been outspoken on this. He's called for changes to Section 230, for example. He's called for other kinds of legislative action. He's appointed very tough enforcers, like the new chair of the FTC, for example, to look at the kind of economic lineup of social media and how these entities are regulated, competition issues, for example, to try to make sure that the playing field is fair and that the kind of the size and bulk of these entities isn't exploited for anti-competitive purposes. But this is a giant challenge that we face, that democracies all around the world face. This challenge of the rapid spread of disinformation, misinformation in very open societies. I think this is just one of the great challenges we face in our democracy and democracies around the world as we head into this next decade. And I think we've got some answers on the table here, but this is a very, very important conversation.
I just finally ask, Ron, one of the things of this president is his, I don't know whether they call it tolerance, but his willingness to hear all sides from within his own party. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. President Trump clobbered those folks in his party who weren't, aligned with him and often ran them out of the party, basically, ran people against them. President Biden is not doing that. But I'm just wondering, at the end of the day, when you have such divides like with with Senator Manchin, Bernie Sanders, and others in different wings that are bringing different perspectives under the tent of the Democratic Party, I'm interested in how you resolve it, because we're all watching it. Everyone's intrigued. But at the end of the day, we don't know how it will come out. But do you sense that everyone is of goodwill, that they understand that there's a kind of civitas, that they all eventually have to agree on something? I just love to get your take on how you approach it, because it's so very different than what we saw in the last 4 years.
Yeah, I think there's a legislative dimension to it and a broader dimension to it. The legislative dimension, the math is obvious. We have 50 Democratic senators. If they don't all agree, we can't pass anything. So you have to get both Joe Manchin and Bernie Sanders' vote on a bill to be able to have a chance of passing that bill. That's just the math. In the House, we have a little more of a margin, but not much more of a margin in a body that large. So again, from a legislative perspective, you have to bring the party together to advance legislation. But I think the president thinks about it more broadly than that. It is important for Democrats to be united, to take on the challenges we're seeing around the country, challenges to things like voting rights, challenges to even the basic elements of democracy that we're seeing. And we need to pull a party together to take that on, to have the kind of broad support. And frankly, not just our party, but get Republicans who are willing to join us in an effort to protect this democracy from the kinds of threats to democracy we're seeing all around the country. And that could only happen in unifying people, the kind of unity the president brought to the campaign in 2020, 81 million voters, more voters than voted for any candidate for any office in this country in the history of this country. And that's the kind of majority you need to stave off the threats to democracy, stave off the threats to this country moving forward. We're going to have to continue to deliver on that here in the Biden White House and here in the things he's doing around the country.
Just real finally, this is real funny. You're a prodigious Twitter. You're the Twitter. You're the the tweeter in chief of this administration, as far as I'm concerned. Does the president read your tweets? Does he have fun with your tweets? Does he ever comment on them?
The president, I talk about a lot of things. Twitter is not one of them. He is trying to fight COVID, help the economy, deal with racism, fight climate change. I don't think my Twitter feed is one of his concerns.
Well, I enjoy it. I want to say thank you to Ron Klain, White House Chief of Staff. He's been Chief of Staff for so many folks out there, it's hard to count. But Ron Klain, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Well, that brings us to the end of our program today. Wow, what a lineup. I'm so thrilled to be with all of you and have these opportunities to ask questions in part on your behalf. So a big thank you to Microsoft and to Southern Company for their support, and to all of you attendees. For anybody who missed these conversations, they're going to be up on our website right away. So share them, watch them, enjoy them. I think it's a fascinating set of lessons in American politics, American history, and American policy. So make sure to join us tomorrow morning starting at 11:30 a.m. Eastern for day 2 of A More Perfect Union. We're going to be talking about space, the economy, and much more. Our headliners session will feature Khan Academy's Sal Khan, Keisha Lance Bottoms, the mayor of Atlanta, and many others. Until then, I'm Steve Clemons. Be well.